Welcome to Protea Conversations, the podcast where leadership in business and accounting isn't just discussed, it's explored. I'm your host, Zane Stevens, and thank you for joining me as we delve into the minds of some of the most influential leaders in the industry. Our journey is one of discovery, from unraveling the unique stories that shaped our guest careers to invaluable advice that fueled their success. We're here to provide you with simple, actionable advice to accelerate your career and personal growth. Whether you're a budding professional or a seasoned executive, these conversations are designed to offer insight and perspectives that resonate with everyone. So tune in, engage, and be inspired as we build better leaders together. Welcome to Protea Conversations.
Welcome to another episode of Protea Conversations. Today I'm speaking with Britt Summerill, a partner at Now CFO based in the San Francisco Bay Area. Britt has over 20 years of experience as the CFO, controller, and auditor for both public and private companies. His expertise spans accounting cleanups, cash flow management, financial analysis, M&A, project management, and SEC reporting, and is particularly skilled in handling complex equity, debt, and derivative structures. More importantly, a really great person. I've been very lucky to know Britt now for quite a while. He's an excellent connector of people and somebody I've come to rely on when some weird and wonderful things have popped up in my world and I don't know where to send them. It generally is, let me send it to Britt. He will either handle it or know somebody that can handle it. And that's been a big asset in my life. So Britt, thank you for taking your time today.
No, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to hop on and be able to have a conversation with you today.
Yeah, it's, we've known each other for a while and we haven't really ever spoken about sort of your history and how you got started. And now you're at Now CFO and you've been there for a long time and, lots going on in that world, as is most of the places in accounting. So I thought it'd be pretty good timing to just talk about you a little bit, find out how you got into the world of accounting, how was that decision made, and talk about what's happening at Now CFO and what the future could hold for you.
Yes. I've been in accounting now around 20 years. I started out at a local firm in Utah, started out as an auditor. I graduated from Weber State University with a master's and a bachelor's in accountancy, went the tax track when it came to my degree, but I really, I was going to be an auditor. I just kind of wanted to be well-rounded. So I went that way. And, I started out doing nonprofits and government assisted living type facilities, specifically stuff around FHA and HUD. And then I moved into like the mortgage industry and then ended up kind of being the person over our mortgage companies at my firm. And then we had the big collapse in 2008, kind of changed things. I also was looking to expand what I was really doing and get into more complex things. At that point, I switched over to our SEC practice and started auditing publicly traded companies and going that route and kind of got into a lot of reverse mergers. Back at the time, there was a lot of companies in China coming over and doing reverse mergers. So it was like the hot thing to do. Mm-hmm. Even saw U.S. companies doing the same things, acquiring shells companies and doing reverse mergers. So really started getting into that. They all got into derivative instruments. And so started getting into the tough transactions and really learning how to handle, more complex things that most people don't really get into. At that point, I decided I wanted to be on the other side of the fence and, not be the one telling you what you did wrong, but maybe telling you how to fix it.
Yep.
So that it was a perfect transition at the time to move over to Now CFO. And I started out in our Salt Lake office where our headquarters is. And really from there, kind of started working up, got thrown on everything under the sun. I said I would never do a public company again. And then I ended up getting thrown on a lot of public companies. And from that point, after a few years, they offered me a partnership and, they gave me a choice between Houston, the Bay Area, and LA. And at that point, I was like, I didn't think I'd make it in the heat in Houston to begin with. And LA, my wife didn't want to go to, but I had friends up here in the Bay Area. And so, really just branched out, came out here, moved the family across country. From there, I started building up the practice out here. And I've been out here now for 10 years, been with the firm for 13, just had my anniversary the other day. Last weekend, I think is when it kind of went through. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride.
That's an incredible story. And that you ended up in the Bay Area, just, I guess weirder things could happen, right? It's a good place. It's not a bad place to land, that's for sure. But talk to me about the decision to start in audit. And I started my career in audit as well at KPMG, and that was sort of, to become a chartered accountant in South Africa, it's just sort of what you did. Like everybody went and did their auditing, got their hours, got signed off. But it's a less traveled path here in the US. So what sort of sparked the idea of like, I'm going to go become an auditor?
Right. I think at the time, when I was coming out of college, it was kind of the thing to do. It was like, look, if you really wanted to make it in the accounting world, you went and worked for a public company or for a CPA firm. And from what I gathered and what I talked to people, it was like, you could go work for industry and you're not going to learn the same amount of stuff you're going to learn by going through a CPA firm. It really gives you a crash course on really higher technical issues, and you're able to go in from there and apply it. So that's why I think I decided to go that way. I really wasn't looking to go industry right off the bat. I didn't know if I wanted to be an auditor for the rest of my life, but at the same time, it was like, look, if you really wanted to keep going up the next level, it is working for a CPA firm. So
Yeah, I mean, I look back at it right now and I can't imagine my life starting anywhere else. I feel like I learned so much in my 3 and a bit years of auditing, though I did a lot of consulting work during that period of time as well. The ability to talk to so many different individuals, and I had the opportunity from small companies to listed companies to be able to work on them. I feel like I was able to absorb so much knowledge from people that are either in it or had done it for a long time. And part of it, I got in trouble a lot of time for talking and not doing my job. But, you know, I
as
took
we all do.
I'm trying to take the opportunity as learn as much as possible. And, if I get paid to do it at the same time, that's amazing. I mean, do you feel like you had sort of the same experience? You really be able to absorb a bunch of information from people who have been there, done that?
Yeah, I mean, I really think there's something to be said to be able to go down the hall and say, hey, here's a complex issue, and having somebody that really has dealt with it before and be able to walk you through it and have that teacher mentality. I think there's a lot to learn there. And really, I feel like the people that have done that and gone through the CPA firm, especially if you've done it, like with me, it was like, look, if you did 3 years, that was a bare minimum. And then you do
Yep.
5 years, and there's really something you start learning after a minute, right? Like the first couple of years, they tell you what to do and you kind of walk through it, but you don't see the big picture. And then I'd say year 3, it starts clicking and it's like, wow, this is why I'm doing this and that. And so from my side, I felt like, being able to be in that atmosphere really did help me grow.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I learned about assertions in college, and then I only really understood what assertions meant by like month 18 of my time at audit. It's like, oh, that's what it means. That's
Yeah,
what
that's
we're
why we
trying to
do it.
prove. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the difference between application and just building a foundation, right? You don't fully understand it until you get out there, and then it's like that's why we do it.
It's true. And probably I also spent too much time, drinking alcohol beverages at college then. So like, probably meant I needed to learn a little quicker.
Right.
I mean, if you were talking to somebody coming out of the accounting space, like out of the college right now, coming into the accounting space, like what would you tell them about taking this opportunity of audit? Because it does feel like a more frowned upon sort of route nowadays.
Yeah, I don't know. We used to, mess with the tax people and say, oh, you don't know, but kind of mess with them a little bit. But there really is something to be said. Like when you get in there and you can see the inner workings of companies and way you should be doing things and why, or where problems could actually arise from. So it's like, it's a difference between living through a problem and being able to see the other side and how it actually affects people. Right. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot of lessons to be learned just by going in there and seeing they screwed up here. This is the actual effect. Right. And,
Yeah.
and here's how you fix it. And I don't feel, if you haven't been in that scenario, it's a lot harder to go in and say, this is how you fix it. And really with us, I mean, it's very similar. I say there's two kind of accounts, right? There's what I call a desk jockey. They're really good at getting in there and just, doing the day to day and kind of running the course. And then there's people that like to go in and fix problems, right? And those are the people that are drawn to this type of lifestyle. And I feel like it's the same people that go into audit, right? You're used to, you like to go in and see where a mess is and how to go through it. And so I think there's a specific type or breed of people that kind of, are selected to go that way. And that's why you have consultant firms, right? Because there's a lot of people that are out there, and it's like, we don't know how to fix it. And it's like, well, you're paying that person. You kind of think, and from a business standpoint, a CEO's like, well, isn't that your job to know how to do that? But in reality, not everybody has that mentality and can get through it. So I really think there is something to be said from going the audit route and being able to look at internal controls, process and procedures, and where there's bottlenecks, and find where there are issues and potential issues that could create bigger problems down the line, and saying, this is what we need to fix.
No, I agree. And I felt, in my career, I went audit, consulting, and then into company, and actually, being part of the accounting team. That roundabout view allowed me, when I came back to the consulting world in my own firm right now, to have a much bigger picture and look at it. And like, my risk tolerance, I guess, would be very different. Like, people be like, oh, that's not the way you do it. I'm like, well, it's real life. Sometimes you just got to get stuff done. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I felt like audit gave me a lot of perspective, because you'd sit down with people and be like, I went through audit as well. I agree. That's what should be happening. But realistically, we don't have 6 people that can, manage the process. We got 2. So we have to do the best we can type situation. I feel like that gave me a lot of insights to help businesses move forward, because I went book knowledge, talk to client, what's possible, take that back, have a conversation with my team, then go back in and, tell them what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and where we can fix it. And I just felt like audit really set me up for success.
Well, and I would say there is that line too of somebody coming out of audit and having that mentality where this is what's wrong. And then like, okay, we can't have it 100% perfect, right? Because just from, quantitatively, it can't be too costly sometimes. And sometimes doing it okay is better just from a cost standpoint. That's like, we understand it's there, but this is what we got to do. And I do feel there is, even when I came out of audit and came over this way, there was a little bit of that, like, you're doing it wrong, right? And it's like, well, is it being done okay enough, right? That it's all right, or is it really something we need to fix right now?
Yeah, I remember one of the clients we had audited for, and you'd walk in and be like, I have a question for you. They're like, just put it on the management letter. We'll deal with it later. I don't care. Just put it on, move on.
Right.
But, and I think that's sort of the mentality, like what can go on the management letter, or what needs to be solved. And that sort of becomes that level of, okay, what's good enough versus maybe needs a bit of improvement. I think it made a big difference.
Right.
Everybody's got an audit story that they'd love to tell about their time. Do you have one that you're willing to share with the audience?
Oh man, it's a good story, but it really isn't. It's not necessarily. It happened in the audit process. So I had this client that harvest organs and things, right? So part of it is, there's certain centers that'll take, if you're a donor and things like that, where they'll go and take out like ACLs out of people. So when you think of cadavers and some of the things that they might pull off that they use afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we were kind of watching the inventory process, me and another person that I was working with, and it happened to be my birthday. And the plan was to go eat steak after we got done with this. And we're watching, part of it is like, we kind of have to watch the inventory process and how you did. And I remember they had a big tub of iodine, and they pulled out a piece of a body part, and they're kind of cutting it up and chopping on it. And I looked over, and the person that was with me started like getting pale and leaning against the wall because he was it looked like he was ready to pass out. And then I was like, you all right? And like, yeah. And then afterwards we went and got steak. And I remember I got a medium rare steak, and the last bite, looked at it, and then I remembered a piece that came off, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to eat that last piece. So it's a very odd audit story, but it's one of those things. You see weird stuff when you go out, just like watching processes and things. And there's certain things that you learn about that you're like, I would have never known about this. Like we had another one that had a boat that they used, and because the water was so rough in the area, they actually had to dispose like cleanup from passengers getting sick. And so there was just things like that. Like, when would you have to learn that, this is, just things that you wouldn't think you'd walk into that are kind of interesting facts that pop up in an engagement, right?
Yeah. No, that is.
Outside of the debits and credits, the things that aren't as exciting. So
Yeah, I did a ton of inventory counts because I was in the automotive space, and some of the crazy stuff and places I would end up. I don't think they would allow me now in 2025 to do some of the counts that I did because insurance wouldn't
right,
allow it. It's 2007, 2008. So things were a little bit more lax at that point.
right, for sure.
Last question on your audit history. Did you enjoy being an auditor?
I think I did. I can see how it could weigh on you though, like just the hours, right? It was. I did a lot of engagements, and I had a lot of year ends that were off from regular year ends. So where other people weren't as busy, I was always busy. So, I think it's rewarding from being able to go through and do these things and see and really learn about organizations. So I don't think I betrayed the fact that I was an auditor, that I worked at a CPA firm. In fact, I usually suggest that it's really helpful for someone to be at it, and also not just to do an internship, right? To stay for 3+ years so you can actually see a big picture. If you've done 4 or 5 years, you really learn a lot.
No, that's great. So you went on over to Now CFO and been there for a while. Sort of talk me through like the decision at that time. Like what was going through? Like you said you were looking for something different, moving on, didn't really
Yeah.
want to go. I mean, how did this opportunity? How did they come to you? Now CFO is a big company, and right now, I know there's been a ton of growth in the last 8
Yeah.
years, really. So it must have been a very different world that you entered into 13 years ago.
Yeah. So at the time, I mean, we're right after mortgage crisis, and I would say the economy wasn't very good back then, and I knew I wanted to get out, but I wasn't actively looking. So Now CFO kind of fell in my lap because someone else I knew that worked at my firm had left a year before. So my firm had broken up into multiple firms at the time, and as part of that person left. And they joined Now CFO, and I was just kind of like, I knew I wanted to get out, but I wasn't actively out there looking. And he approached me and was like, "Hey, you want to go to lunch?" Well, the lunch turned into an interview with the CEO. Back then it was a lot smaller. So it was like, I didn't know that I was walking into that. And then it was just like the opportunity, and there was a bump in pay, at that point. It was like, this seems like I hadn't even talked to my wife. And then it was one of those things of, uh, the next day I got the offer, and oddly enough, one of the partners came by and was like, "You're not leaving, are you?" And I was like, "Actually, I might be." And I had no idea. He just walked in. I was just telling somebody else in there what had happened. And then, yeah, I moved over, and I'd say it was a little rough at first moving over and like seeing people do things wrong, and like thinking they have to fix everything right off the bat. So there was a little bit of a conversion I had to take. And I honestly, I got on a client right off the bat that was very difficult. They hadn't been paying. I was replacing somebody else that was working on it. The client actually fired me right after I'd walked in after the first week, and was like, "Hey, it's nothing against you, but we're going to go a different route because of the last consultant." And it was just this odd thing, but I was like, "Hey, if you guys need anything," they really like my work, but they decided they were going to go a different route. And I said,
Yep.
if something happens, let me know. I'd love to keep working with you guys. And a week later, they fired that company and came back to me, and they
Wow.
ended up being a client for like 10+ years. I think they might even still be a client out of our Salt Lake office, but it was very interesting. It went from being fired the first day, or, in that first week, to them like really believing in it. It's just me being me, fixing problems. So.
Interesting. For those who don't know, can you sort of like sum up Now CFO as it is in a nutshell?
Yeah. So Now CFO, we do outsourced accounting, everything from bookkeeping to CFO. What kind of makes us different is we actually hire people full-time and salaried individuals over here. We have 50 offices in 25 states. We have an office in Nepal with 50 people, and we do everything from bookkeeping to CFO. We also help with placements. So it's a little bit of a different organization. It's not a franchise. So if I need to use somebody in another office, which happens quite a bit with expertise, I can go grab someone from that office. And so it's a really good organization. When I came in, I think we may have had 4 offices, and yeah, it's ballooned. And recently we've had private equity also come in just in the last, oh geez, what is it, 3 months or so?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's it's all moving upward, and it's a very, very interesting time to be in it. But we were growing about 20% every year, year upon year. We were self-funded, and then just got to a point where it's like, look, if we're really going to make a really push, we got to bring someone else in here. And so it's been a fun ride. Definitely trying at times, but there's a lot of growing pains that happen in companies, right? And we constantly are improving things, so it's been interesting. And I've definitely fallen a couple times and picked myself back up and dusted the knees off and kept going with. I think we've all, anyone that's ran a company, you get that client or customer that burns you, and you learn a lot from those those things. And so I feel like I'm in a really good spot, having one of my better years right now, and it's looking like we're going to keep growing. So
Yeah, it's amazing. A massive organization at the moment. I do want to touch on how you guys have grown, but just, early days on the private equity, any sort of general feedback on how that is, any major effects on your life, or is it sort of just business as usual for now?
yeah, I would say right now it's kind of business as usual. There are some plans of expansion and some acquisitions, and the nice thing is they're looking to us to be the platform company. So anytime you're with public equity, a lot of times it's either you're the platform or you're someone being acquired into the platform, and it's always better to be the platform. So I know they're looking into some acquisitions right now. Nothing major's happened. We've looked into our plans of moving forward, and I would say it's all been pretty positive. We honestly, before this happened, we ran a lot, like PE was in there, trying to grow. Our whole thing the whole time is we're going to keep growing, and there's always more room to grow and expand. And so, from a PE aspect, I feel like that's what they're going to do anyway.
Okay.
And so some people that don't, I've seen some people say, it's all negative, and I don't feel that way. I feel like, look, if you don't want change to happen and you just want to sit where you're at, then yeah, it might be a bad experience. But if that's what you're already pushing for and you get those extra tools, I'm seeing positive things happening since they've come in, and I'm really excited about the next 3 to 5 years of what it could do for the company. So
That's great. I will check in with you in about a year's time to see you follow up
yeah,
and if you still feel the same
see
way.
see if it's changed.
Exactly. I mean, there's good and bad stories about private equity. And I think one of the things that anybody's thinking about going to private equity, or even, if you guys are looking to acquire and they want to get sucked into that situation, look for a value set like match. I mean, I think that's
Yeah,
any partnership that you're going into, make sure that you all have the same values, the same goals, and you're all running on the same path. And then it generally will go well. I mean, there's going to be trying times because they're chasing profit growth, right? Like there's always important, top line, bottom line. They want to do it, and that comes with pressure. I've been in those companies where growth is number one. It's stressful. I mean, you guys have been doing it for a while, but who knows what that
right.
looks like. But I would just say, I mean, I theoretically have had private equity since day one. So I sort of know what non-accountants expect and what they're looking for. It comes with pressures, different pressures you won't think of. And that's just something for people to think about. Obviously, in your guys' case, it's a perfect match, right? You both had the same
Yeah,
goal.
and
We want to grow.
I would say this. I mean, like, look, we didn't just talk to one firm, right? I mean, there are multiple firms, and from everything I've gathered, like, we talked to some people out in New York, and it really wasn't a fit. And then we were already doing some stuff with one of them out of Dallas, out of our Dallas office. And so far, I mean, yeah, like, look, and maybe check back in a year's time. But I would say that, we're already pushing for that, and I'm always wanting to grow. And, my goal is to try and double where I'm at in the next couple of years. Right. And this year's been a pretty stellar year in that push. So, from my side, it's like, look, if I can give more opportunities to the people I employ to move up, then I'm doing my job, right?
Yeah,
If they're getting the same type of opportunities I've gone through my life, then I feel like I'm doing a good job.
that's a great way to think about it. But let's talk about sort of how Now CFO has grown, because it has been, quite a story from pretty small to where you guys are right now. There has been this consistent growth cycle. What is sort of the internal mentality, the process? Like, how do you guys approach business that you've been able to sustain such long-term growth or year over year?
Yeah, I mean there's a few things that we really focus on, and like, we've been evolving probably in the last 6-7 years of really going after data, right? And focusing on data and what does it take to, if we're talking in a sales cycle, like, what's your conversion rates, and what, from a networking event, what does that usually yield? How many network events and one-on-ones do I need to go to get a lead, to get to a sales meeting, to get to a close, to get to a start, right? I would say from that, knowing that type of data, when we first started, you didn't really have it, right? It was a little more, we're doing stuff on Excel sheets here and there, and,
Yeah.
not really in there. And then we get really ERP, and we're using Power BI and running real data through. I think really having that visibility gives you the path to go in. And it's the same thing when we're talking to a client, right? I mean, a lot of times when you're that, under $10 million company, you're doing things by what's in your bank account, and what I can have a conversation with someone down the hall. And then you start hitting that point where it's like, okay, I need to look at data and see really what's happening and manage by the data, right? And I think that's where, when we started pulling that, you could really see the movement. And honestly, I think the whole COVID thing kind of helped the industry overall. And we have several factors that's happened, right? You have a lot of accounts retiring. You had a movement of people being okay with other people working remotely. That really opened it up, and we got a massive expansion in that time frame. I opened up Chicago because I had hired someone remotely up there and did that. And so there was a lot of stuff around that I felt like overall from most of us, all the white collar people retiring, things like that. And then, from moving from a more traditional to there's other options, that's really helped a lot of people expand. And I know for us, we really took advantage of that fact. And so, like, look, everything's changing. We got new stuff coming out. There's, AI is going to change the landscape. We already have, people going overseas because it's hard to get enough of staff. You see every CPA firm doing it. We've done it going into Nepal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, the world's changing.
Yep.
It reminds me of when I became an auditor first, and we had just switched from doing everything on paper, and now everything was in a folder online, and some partners still wanted you to print everything out, right? I think we're hitting that kind of landscape again. But if you know how to guide it, I mean, it really helps with the expansion, and that's kind of what we pushed, and we just kind of spread across the map at that time.
Okay, so just pull it back then. It took the data that's available, a lot of disciplined processes, and then just some real hard work and getting in and having enough conversations and networking.
Pretty much, yeah. Like I'm pretty diligent, and our whole thing is like, look, my attitude on working with people and looking at reciprocity, right? From me getting leads from people, it takes work. You have to put in work. And part of that is actually giving to them and making sure that they understand what you're looking for and being honest with people. I think that kind of stuff helps, but really going from there, and then, being able to press out with the knowledge and saying, okay, now I got this data behind me, I can quantify. So if I want to add 20,000 to the bottom line, how many sales do I need to get to that revenue from that percentage? And then dial back and say, okay, here's some realistic activity you need to do in order to get there. And I think there's a lot of people with sales teams that don't do that. And so really we've evolved our sales team. There's a lot of training that we do in our firm. We have trainings. I think I do 2 or 3 trainings a week where we're either hitting the basics back on, focusing on collections, focusing on reciprocity with our networking partners, to using the technology that we have. and getting into a report that helps us manage that, right? So there's a lot of stuff in there. And I think, teams that constantly want to evolve and change, train their teams, and they look at real statistics to be able to say, this is what's going on and this is how we try and make it better, right?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So you're known as a super connector slash super giver, and I know that is part of your process. I've heard you speak about it before, sort of going on a call and looking
Right.
for opportunities to refer to other people. Can you sort of talk us through that and share some insight on how you do that? I think it'll be really helpful for accountants who I think get stuck in just trying to sell. And I'm going to say it super loosely because I think most accountants don't know how to sell, and your approach to selling is very different to what the textbook would teach you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said, and accountants typically aren't the best at selling, right? There's some people that are more charismatic, but I think we all kind of get pushed at some point if you make partner that you're trying to build a book of business, right? So
Mhm.
part of what you need to figure out is, first off, who would be your main best referral sources, the ones that you can give to, that you can receive from. If you can find that reciprocity between the two of you, those are going to be your main industry type people you go after. So like mine, with what we do a lot with CPA firms, because there's a point where an auditor can't do this type of work, right? But there's
Yep.
independence issues. So there's always room to help with audit prep and do things like that. There's bankers where there's covenants, they're looking at the finances, and there's issues there that turn into cleanup jobs, right? And then like M&A, transactional attorneys tend to be really good as well. So if you can figure out those and like, look, I can see those same things that I can give out. So if I can ask a company, who their payroll provider is and who their bank is, and more importantly, not just ask those questions, but ask them, are those still working, right? Because we're coming in, there's change happening there. There are other areas that are actually a problem, and actually care about that, and then be able to feed the funnel of your networking partners. That's really what you need to do. And you can go into a whole thing on where to go meet people and how to stay in front of them. But, there's also a thing where I see people grab, business cards left and right from people. And then you talk to them. I actually, interesting story, had a manufacturer that did that. They did it in the construction industry, build cabinets, things like that. And he's like, yeah, I don't know why we can't get new sales. And I'm talking to him, and I I go to job sites and I go talk to people. And then I'm like, well, what do you do after you talk to her? And you get the business card. There was a stack up on their fridge in their office, all these cards. And like, well, if you're just doing it, if you're not following up, you're not doing anything. Right. And
For
so,
sure.
that's the other side of it is, on top of looking at ways to help your networking partners, it's like the follow up. You've got to be in front of these people. You've got to stay top of mind. You can disappear for a few months, and next thing you know, they're talking to somebody else, right? And so
For sure.
I feel like just staying on top of it, and then generally being a good person that's looking out for them and helping them build their book of business. If you can get those same like people to help you build your book of business, and then now you're getting way more out of it than, doing it on your own.
Yeah, the point of staying in front of people is so important. And, you're talking about data and a discipline process. Having a process to stay connected to your referral partners is important. And there's a lot of methodologies on it. There's like the Sweet 16 process, and there's these other processes. I mean, I'm just so good at like, these are the important people that are important to me. And let's make sure I'm just rotating through them, making sure. And then that could be anything, right? Sharing article with them, reaching out, having a call with them, having coffee, having lunch, making an introduction. Like, all of those things stay important because one thing we all have to realize is that we're not that important, and nobody's going to remember you if you just don't stay in contact with them. They'll be like at times like, oh yeah, that's the Zane guy, right? He does accounting for the wine space. Oh yeah. But if I'm not abroad about and people don't see my face, they will forget about you. And that's not because they're terrible people. It's just that none of us are that special.
Yeah. And you also find some people that, the only time you hear from is when they're trying to sell to you. That's not a good thing either, right? You want to touch them on a personal level and be able to have conversations. Sometimes it doesn't need to be about sales, right? To keep
Yep.
them at mind. But funny enough, I was talking to a potential client, and they'd brought up, they knew someone that I knew, and it's like, yeah, and like, yeah, they asked me to go to lunch. Looks like they're trying to sell me something again. It's like, well, that's not the attitude you want to hear.
Yeah.
If they're bringing up your name, it's more of like, hey, that's a great person. I love that guy. Yeah, if you get into that mode, sales are a lot easier if you can do that. And part of it too is like you got to watch out for. There's really good people that you give to and they do great for your clients, but they never think about you. And like I always say, like, look, if you could find that same person that does the same great job but they give back to you, how quickly are you going to switch? Right. So you
Yeah.
got to make sure that you're taking care of the people that are taking care of you.
Yeah. No, that's important. And, building relationships is tough at times because, I know people that I love referring to, but I go into it knowing that there's no ways they're ever going to refer to me because they just won't have the opportunity. Like
Yeah.
it's not, just what it is. And there's the vice versa ones. And I always feel bad about those ones. But then it's sort of sitting back going, I know they can refer to me, but I probably can't refer to them because it's a service that just never really comes up in my business. But how else?
Yeah.
How can I find those people? There's like an HR person that I speak to, not really operating in my industry, but then I find other opportunities when I meet with other people in recruitment, HR, business strategy, like, hey, this is a good person, especially if you're operating outside of the industry I am. And I try and make sure that they get those referrals because I want to be able to give back to them. I think that's sort of what you're touching on is it doesn't always have to be referral for a referral and never,
That's right.
stop counting referrals to referrals. You're going to fail the test that way. It's not a great way to do business. But find ways to give back in another capacity if referral isn't a possibility. There always is something. I mean, I've had people that have just sent me like a book. They're like, "Oh, Zane, I know you talk about kindness a lot," and they just sent me like a book at Christmas saying, "This book I found while I was walking around a bookstore." I was like, "That's amazing, right?" Like I've been able to refer to them. They know they can't refer to me, but they knew I would enjoy this book, so they sent me the book. I keep referring to that person because they're thoughtful. They can help my clients. And I think those create really good relationships, and finding good people that do good work that you can trust sending work to is so important. And then when you find opportunities to connect them, the flywheel just starts
Yeah.
turning, right? And it sort of takes care of itself. I say that loosely because there's a ton of hard work. And, a lot of this I learned from you, Britt, because I've heard
Yeah.
you talk about the way you do it. And I know you do such a great
Well,
job of it.
and that's the thing, right? Like you don't always have to give a lead, but you can look out for people that they get leads from, right? And like, look, hey, do you know this person? I just ran into them. They work in your space. And part of it is knowing what the person does and who are their main contacts and who are the best referral sources. Because if you know that type of stuff, then you'll be listening out when you're talking to other people. I'm like, hey, maybe I'm not going to get anything from this person, but they would be great to work with this person that I know, right? It's like one of those things. Like I have a buddy, and I know you know him too, Sam Lee. It's like I always said, oh, I never get anything from a mortgage person because I'm working with businesses, they're working with individuals. It's a different cycle, but at the same time, if you need to be connected to someone, Sam's a person to talk to, right? And a lot of what I learned from Sam as well, where it's like, look, there's ways of giving back without giving a lead every time. Nobody could give a lead every day, right? But at the same time, if you're thinking about somebody and finding a way to help somebody out, whether that's a book or whatever, or getting them a networking partner, get them involved in charities that that they're excited about, whatever it is. If you're actually thinking about that person, they'll start connecting you on a certain level. Reciprocity happens.
For
Whether it's
sure.
connecting you with something outside of business. Look, if you're looking out for other people, it's going to come back to you. I mean, I know some people don't believe in karma, but I kind of do. I'm hoping some people that give bad karma might have it happen to them at some point. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's like, look, if I'm trying to be a good person, I'm trying to help the people out that I feel like are my partners, then I feel like at some point they're going to help me out.
Yeah, I think it's so true. I'm in accounting because I want to help people. And that could mean my clients, that could mean my team, but that could also mean people I meet, right? And that reciprocity means a lot. And, a hint for anybody that is dealing with super connectors and have them in your network, always go to them and ask them for somebody, even if you know they're going to
Yeah.
introduce you to somebody because they love making that introduction, and that is enough to warm their souls towards you and want to do more for you. It's a bit of a cheat code. Carter Welch is my group leader. I ask him stuff all the time. I know he's going to introduce me to you. I know the person, and know-ish the person, but he loves making those introductions, and that's the way I can thank him for the introductions he's made, because I don't have a lot of opportunities to refer him, but he has opportunities to refer me, and that's my way of giving back, giving him an opportunity to introduce me to people.
Yeah, it's a circle of life.
For sure. But tell me a little bit about your day today. What does a week in Britt's life look like at Now CFO?
Oh man. Yeah. So, I mean, like people ask me because they see me out networking a lot. I do quite a bit of networking, but they're like, oh, you probably don't do any billable work. I'm like, no, I do. I still work with a couple of companies. And, my specialty is typically working with companies that are public. So I have a few companies that I work with, and I am probably doing, 15, 20 hours billable, sometimes more. And then it's a mix of networking and then practice management, right? Just making sure that my people are taken care of, that my clients are being taken care of. And, it wouldn't work without delegation. I'll tell you that much, because I do keep my calendar super stacked all the time. I'm someone that believes that empty holes in a calendar is a problem. So I'm always trying to stay active and make sure that I'm getting in front of people and, doing that. But I'd say, yeah, just making sure relationships are staying up with my networking partners, my clients, and my employees. That's typically my day, on top of doing a little bit of billable here and there.
Nice. Keeping busy. I must say, I do like gaps in my calendar. Grabbing some food every now and then is super helpful. But the last couple of months, there hasn't been too many of them, and
Right.
a lot of that is self-inflicted. Filling the gaps in meetings, team meetings, touch points. It's how we grow, right? That's how we get things moving forward.
Right.
Talk to me about your short-term goals. You spoke a little bit about the revenue goals, but what other short-term goals do you have for yourself or the business?
Yeah. I mean, on top of wanting to double, I mean, there's some things in there that I want to be able to give some opportunity to some of my folks underneath to move up into some more managerial roles. So, we have more options there. So really trying to develop some of my directors to get to that next level, family wise, finding a little bit more time in my day. Obviously, that I think time management's the hardest thing for any business owner, being able to juggle doing stuff with my family as well as taking care of business, and then actually having some personal time, right? And so, some of my goals, I know we're planning like a family trip next, try and unplug a little bit on that end. But overall, I have some real high growth goals that I'm trying to do, and maybe eat a little healthier. I don't know. I always say that's going to happen, but I always feel like I'm still
Wrong time of the year to be talking about it. Halloween candy coming, then we got
Oh yeah, you
Thanksgiving,
got it. This is
Christmas.
the worst. try,
January's
try,
problem, eating healthy.
try and cut back a little bit, but yeah, no, it's overall, I just want to make sure that I'm giving my kids the amount of time they need and stuff, and my family, as well as making sure that I can give opportunities to people around me.
Yeah, I love that. Finding opportunities for your team to grow is super helpful in your growth aspiration, right? Because then you have the right people ready to take on that additional work.
Right.
Couple of just like random questions about the accounting industry, just to sort of round out this conversation around the accounting world. What is your thoughts on AI, and what is your approach towards it?
Yeah, I know everyone's getting sick of hearing about AI, but I would say this: like, look, AI is good to a point. It's like things like ChatGPT and these others. You got to treat it as if it's an intern, right? I feel like there's good starting points and good ways of cleaning things up and editing. Will it completely take over accounting? I don't think so. It might take away data entry and things like that, but that's not what I want to do anyway.
Correct.
I don't think that, it's like some of those jobs that nobody wants to do. That's what it's going to take away, the repetitive stuff, right? There's still going to be plenty of stuff. And I'd say from a regulation standpoint, things change all the time and things are under more scrutiny. So there's still going to be plenty of work for accountants out there. I just think what we'll end up seeing is there's going to be less of entering things in the system and more analysis being done and more top end work, right? I think that's where it's going to change it. I do see a good opportunity with it. As we all know, most firms have had to go overseas for a lot more of their repetitive tasks just because we can't find anybody. And so with I don't remember what the exact statistic was, but I think it was like I don't remember the exact, but less people are going into the accounting programs in universities and even less are graduating, right? And at the same time, we're having a massive amount of CPAs leaving, tax folks, audit, you name it, people in the industry. And so there is a big void that's going to need to be filled. So I feel from that side, the mix between AI and having some stuff being done overseas, I think that's where the move's going to have a little bit more effect than actually hitting the top end. I was having this conversation with somebody else, and there is a certain amount of what we do that we learn in the field and starting on the low level. But as in anything, when calculators were made, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? When Excel hit the market, there's been a whole bunch of things that are like, this is going to change. And how would you learn by not doing that?
Yeah.
We find a way. You're always going to find a way around it. And I think the people that are really afraid of AI and what it's going to do are going to be in trouble. The people that really look to harness it and figure out ways to make it better for what they're doing, they're the ones that are going to be successful. So
You spoke about the pipeline issue. Do you have any big ideas to fix that pipeline issue?
It's a hard thing because I think it's going to take a certain push to get people coming out of high school to want to go into that industry. And I think part of it too is you look at legal and you look at accounting and you look at some of these fields where honestly, like when you go in to be an auditor or you're going in to be, you start out in law, it's like they're working them to death. I think the big switch is kind of happening because some of the kids coming out today, they're looking at it as more of a work-life balance and looking at things a little different. And so there is a shift from that mentality of hard work get you to the American dream versus
Yeah.
what, looking at. So I think there's got to be a gap in there. And maybe that's where AI steps in, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
look, now you're not working a million hours because some of those tasks are taken away. And so I think there just needs to be a shift in the way it's looked at. Because when I came out, it was like, oh yeah, you have to work like
Yeah.
a dog.
Yep.
That's
That's
just the
part of
way
the
it
journey,
is.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, or else you're not going to make it, right? And now it's like, well, you can go make it over here and not do that same thing. And I feel like that's kind of how it's turned into. So I think it's just polishing up the image, and part of that is the CPA world's going to have to change slightly. You're going to have to figure out ways not to burn people out, and if that happens, then I think you're going to see a real change in dynamic, and that could be through AI.
Yeah, I think my take on it is people are still willing to work hard. They're just not willing to work long hours. And I think the accounting world's got to get that those two things are very different, because I think a lot of old school CPAs still believe long hours equals hard work. And that's not necessarily true.
Well, and I would say this too. If you look at some of the degrees coming out of college and people having a hard time finding jobs now, especially that the economy's changing, less than 2% in accounting.
Yep.
It's like, hey, you'll always have a job in accounting. So from that standpoint, there is some positives. I feel like like it's got to be polished up a little bit, like sold back that this is the thing. When I was in, it was like, if you go into audit and you have accounting, you can do anything in business, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And like, how many accountants do you know no longer accountants that are doing something else in business, CEOs doing other things?
I just finished
So
reading Shoe Dog, and that's a CPA that started one of the biggest brands in the world. So
there you go.
Yep. And those are the things we should focus more on, right? I think we don't speak about how accounting is a great base for anything in business.
Exactly.
Britt, what's the best advice you've ever received that's helped you in your career?
Shut up. One of the things that, and I mean that in a nice way, right? It was I got the when you're in a sales meeting, don't talk so much. The person that's the smartest in the room is typically the one that's not talking. That's what the perception is. And so one of the things is try and listen a little bit more than talk. And I've had to teach myself that over the years. And there's some people that I'll see in multiple industries. Accounting's one of them, but they'll come out and they'll just spit out all this data and use the lingo, and they're talking to someone that isn't. I'll tell you this, if I've had insurance people do this to me many times over the years, and I just black out. The eyes glaze over, and you got to learn how to cut it back, listen a little bit more, and answer off of that, as opposed to here's my script.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think it's important. And as an accountant that speaks to other accountants that speak a ton of jargon, I don't understand you, and I'm an accountant. So I promise you the non-accountants have no idea what we're talking about.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've had that too, where somebody like you get someone on the tax side talking to you, and you're not a tax person, or you get someone on the valuation side, you kind of know what they're talking about, but you're like, for sure somebody. And if I started talking about derivatives and going into that, the normal person, I know it because I've done it to my wife, and I've watched her eyes glaze over when she's staring at me. So
yeah, I think talking human is a great lesson to learn, and I like the lesson of shut up. That's a great one.
It's a good one.
Britt, as we close out here, I always like to ask people to share something a little bit about their personal life, just to get a rounded picture of who you are as a person. So anything you'd like to share about you outside of work?
Yeah, I mean, like, look, I grew up an avid skier. If I could have, I would have been a ski bum, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't pay the bills, especially when you start having kids.
Yep.
You know, and a lot like skiing, right? You get on a black diamond, you get on a double black, and you're looking at this hill that's immense, and it's like, there's things called overthinking.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need to turn and go down the hill. And I feel the same way. It's like, look, when you got a big problem in front of you, sometimes you just have to jump in and go, right? And you'll figure it out as you're going. So skiing's taught me a lot in life. I've only broken a few things, but at the same time, you get up on something. And I had that conversation with my wife one time. We were up at Snowbird during the summer, actually during Oktoberfest, and you look down these hills, and it's like, I wouldn't want to go stand by that hill, but if there's snow and skis involved, I'm right on it, right? No problem. It doesn't. But if it's not there, it's like, wow, like I don't even want to get near that edge. So there's like everyone's got a little daredevil in their life. And I think I learned a little bit of that in my skiing. So.
Britt, I really appreciate the time today. We like to end off with 5 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Go for it.
What's your dream vacation?
Ooh, it's always something tropical. I'm going to be doing it soon anyway. I'm going to go back to Hawaii.
Always a good option. Do you prefer audiobooks or paper books?
Audio. I don't have time to sit down and read.
I sort of feel you on that one. If you've only got 20 minutes to exercise, what would that exercise be?
Geez, again, skiing. If I could go skiing for 20 minutes, that's better than anything else.
If you were stuck on a deserted island, what 3 items would you bring along? And they could be any 3 items. This is just a made-up world.
Yeah, I'm practical, so it would have to be some kind of flint tool to start a fire, a pot so you can boil water, and then some kind of cover for shelter, right? And maybe it's a tarp. I think if you have those 3 things, you're probably set for at least a little bit.
That is the most accountant answer I've received on this show. I'll take it. The last question, Britt, as you were growing up, a young Brit, what was your favorite meal?
Oh, man. Yeah, I think every kid loves macaroni and cheese, right? You can't go wrong with that, or pizza. I'd say either one of those, but I ate a lot of macaroni and cheese. A lot of kids will eat a lot of chicken nuggets. I was more the macaroni and cheese kid. So.
Love it. Britt, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
And with that, we ended another Protea Conversations. Thank you for joining us in this journey of learning and inspiration. Today we've gained insight from our guest and taken another step towards understanding the diverse tapestry of leadership in business and accounting. Remember, each conversation is a step towards the positive transformation of business leaders. We hope our discussion has given you valuable takeaways to apply in your own career and life. Don't forget to subscribe to Protea Conversations on YouTube and Spotify so you never miss an episode. We'd also love to hear your thoughts and experiences, so connect with me on social media channels. I'm most active on LinkedIn and would love you to join the conversation. Join us next time for more engaging stories, advice, and conversations that matter. Until then, keep striving for excellence, embracing growth. Thank you for listening, be kind, and goodbye from Protea Conversations.